let's talk about John Updike for this one. So in a recent video where I was breaking down a specific scene in that movie, The Beguiled, or the story, The Beguiled, there's a most recent version with Colin Farrell and Nicole Kidman. I was talking about the one in 1971 with Clint Eastwood. I began getting into, towards the end of that video, the story The Centaur by this man, penned by this man, John Updike, a noted author, passed in 2009. This guy had a little bit of a preoccupation with incest. So, let me show you a few things. First of all, and I will likely be making another video in the future at some point, breaking down a few things, a few scenes in this story by John Updike entitled Incest. This was actually published in The New Yorker back in 1957. And right there, that should tell you something, guys. This story, if you're being a little bit of a sleuth, this story was not meant for your average Joe the plumber. This story was meant for quote-unquote highborns, if you will, the aristocrats, the Wall Street guys, the big name publishers, the well-educated people who come from really, upper middle class or wealthy backgrounds, family backgrounds. Likely born into lots of resources, good education, got a pretty good start. These are the directors and the producers of the movies in Hollywood. That's the kinds of people they were meant to be the audience of this story. All right? And likely, considering it's back in 1957, I'll bet you anything, it would have just been mostly men. Women would have been reading Cosmo or whatever, their... And even these days, that's often the way it goes. There are probably more women reading The New Yorker these days than back in 1957. What do I know? But, so there was a specific target audience for this story. And it was, let's just be frank, it was wealthy white men. All right? The aristocracy of America, and probably in a few other places in the world, too. I'm sure that a few other countries got this story. So, keep that in mind. Some writers, authors, musicians, artists of all kinds, sometimes they have a specific audience in mind. They're not necessarily always all trying to reach the masses. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they have a targeted audience who they know will get the reference. All right. And here is a quote by John Updike. I mentioned this quote at some point in a previous video, and I recall not being able to recall whether the quote could be attributed to John Updike or to Vladimir Nabokov, and it's Updike. So, rape is the sexual sin of the mob, adultery of the bourgeoisie, and incest of the aristocracy. One reason why I thought it could have perhaps been Nabokov is because I believe he was born into Russian aristocracy. As it was starting to, lose its glamour or its money and power. So I think he was born into a time where the old ways were sort of shifting into a new regime. And the old glamour of the past was starting to fade rapidly. Anyway, let's not dwell on Nabokov. We're talking about Updike. Although I do think that I wouldn't be surprised if they hung out. I think that there was at least some written correspondence between them, officially, publicly acknowledged written correspondence between them. I think I read that like a couple of years ago during the course of some of my research, but don't hold me to that. So yeah, just to say it one more time, and these are very bright, these are very intelligent men, guys. Nabokov, Updike, well-educated, good writers. I mean, like, notable writers. They're known as being geniuses, all right? So, and think about how many brilliant people out there have to all agree on that for them to be known as geniuses, right? Lots and lots of high IQ people have unanimously been like, yo, yeah, these dudes know what they're talking about. All right? So don't just listen to me. I'm pointing out this. So again, rape is the sexual sin of the mob, adultery of the bourgeoisie, and incest of the aristocracy. Now, keep in mind, guys, we have our own kind of aristocracy here in America. We have these political families. We have families in Hollywood that have sort of taken over the industry. We have big name industrial families like the DuPonts, right? Banking families, Rothschilds. They didn't even start over here. So just saying, we have our own kind of aristocracy. Incest of the aristocracy. All right? So I want to use the Centaur, point out a few things in the Centaur. So John Updike wrote this story. It's called The Centaur. Go ahead and read it if you'd like. He's a very good writer, so I suggest it. But following the same trend from my previous video about the little girl with the turtle in the Beguiled, symbolism, the symbolism behind that specific scene in that story that suggested that the soldier, had raped the little girl, and they didn't show it graphically, but they used symbolic actions and imagery to suggest it. So that also happens in writing. And so let me really quickly, so we're starting on page 27. I wanted to point out first where I started saying how Venus, let me explain the Centaur a little bit. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of this story for those of you who haven't read it and don't want to read it. It's actually pretty interesting how Updike laid this story out. Most of the setting is in basically a high school atmosphere. So we're set in a high school, and all of the characters are based on characters from Greek mythology. So a lot of the students are based on like the heroes, the demigod heroes. One is based on Hercules, you can tell. There's Achilles. And the first name of each character corresponds with the first letter of the name, that is, the first letter of the name of each character corresponds with the first letter of the name of their Greek god or hero. So, for example, the principal of the school, this should make sense to you, is a guy named Zimmerman. Zimmerman, Zeus. Zeus was the king of the Olympian gods, so it makes sense that the principal would be Zimmerman. Then there's Hamel, I believe it was, Hummel or Hamel. He's sort of like the tech engineer guy. He has a shop that's just adjacent to the high school, and he's married to the high school girls' gym teacher. That he stands for Hephaestus. All right, so he's like the Vulcan. He's the blacksmith of the gods. The story centers on the main character of the story is a guy named Caldwell, who is clearly a centaur being a half man, half horse. And Caldwell starts with a C because he is meant to represent Chiron, 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 who was the first centaur in Greek mythology. And he is said to have been the teacher to many of the heroes, like Hercules, who wound up actually killing him with a poisoned arrow eventually. And that's sort of how the story opens, is he's shot with an arrow. He's shot by Hercules with an arrow. And he goes to see Hamel, the representative of Hephaestus, to get the arrow out of his leg. So he has a run-in at some point. This scene is from a very steamy scene in the girls' locker room, where Caldwell, or Chiron, has a run-in with Vera, Venus, or Aphrodite would be the Greek name, the goddess of love, who was married to Hephaestus, and she plays the girls' gym teacher in this high school. All right? And, let me point out to you that Chiron, so we all know that a lot of the Greek stories, the ancient Greek myths, are kind of lurid, let's say. And there's some funky stuff going on there. Well, there's sort of a flowery version of the story of Chiron where, he was the mentor to the heroes, and, you could just leave it at that if you're talking to kindergartners, all right? Chiron the centaur, he taught the heroes how to be good, brave men. Now, the seedy underbelly of that story, the sort of more grown-up adult version of that story, is Chiron had a very, shall we say, Spartan soldier approach to his mentoring the heroes, as in, it's always sort of been a laugh to people who study Greek mythology. There's always been this suggestion of there were sexual relationships between Chiron, the centaur, and his students, the heroes that he mentored. So, so I just wanted to make sure I got that one out there, set that aside. So let's go back to focusing on this one page here, page 27 in the story of the centaur. I was beginning to tell you guys in the last video how Venus, or Vera, the gym teacher, when she's beginning her seduction of Chiron. I don't think he even sees it coming quite yet. But the way she does that is she starts sort of laying the groundwork, planting it in the back of his mind, her in the position of a little boy. So where is this? Priapus, my ugliest child, worthy of his conceiving. Dionysus made me perform as if I were another boy. So, right here. So I guess, sorry, it's page 28. There was something I was looking at on 27. But we're going to start on 28. So I'll read it again really quick. Priapus, my ugliest child, worthy of his conceiving. Dionysus made me perform as if I were another boy. So she knows. She's the goddess of sexuality. She knows what Caldwell, aka Chiron, is actually into. All right? So she's kind of starting to plant it in the back of his mind, this idea of sex with her as if she's a little boy. And then she quickly moves on to disrobing in front of him And I believe she mentions Mars, Aries at some point. That's maybe what I was looking for. I want to say there was at least one other ex-lover she spoke of where she talked about how he liked it in bed. So I want to point out another, here it is. Page 30. Chiron's starting to get the picture, I think, that she's seducing him. And she asks him, "Are you afraid? Are you afraid?" she whispered. "How do you do it with R.A.I.N.S? Do you mount her?" His voice rose small and parched in his constricted throat. "It would be incest. It always is. We all flow from chaos. It is day." So we all flow from chaos. So I'll read it again. "Are you afraid?" she whispered. "How do you do it with R.A.I.N.S? Do you mount her?" His voice rose small and parched in his constricted throat. "It would be incest. It always is. We all flow from chaos." So she tells him, Venus tells Chiron, we all flow from chaos. Also, I keep thinking about pointing out the references to certain colors. He's big on using colors, guys. And the color red, wherever it pops up in the story, is significant. It definitely is associated with Venus here. He talks about her hair being red. And when he does eventually do the deed with her, it's described as him floating in a studded sea or swimming in a studded sea of red trees, something along those lines. So here we have a reference to incest again, guys. One of the reasons I'm pointing this out, and we have a reference to chaos. Remember how I keep saying I think that they might be chaos worshippers. This cult of people that I've been talking about that I think engage in incestuous relationships with their children and possibly even child trafficking and possibly even sexual relationships with any children they can get their hands on. I do think that it's possible that they worship chaos. Remember how I've been pointing out there are a lot of signs and symbols I see that they are using and that are associated with them and their artwork or their whatever content they're creating that suggest chaos worship. So yes, there is this connection being made between incest and chaos. The idea being that whatever you believe the first god to be, if you are monotheistic and you think that there was a first deity that kicked everything off. Now for the Greeks, it seems it was chaos. They had a deity for chaos and he was one of the oldest deities, all right, in their pantheon. I'm not 100% sure I agree with them, but that's what it seems, that's what the Greeks believed. Or at least some of the Greeks for a certain period of, some of the ancient Greeks for a certain period of time. because I do think this pantheon definitely changed and grew over time. So it's unfair to just say, oh, they all believed that chaos kicked everything off. But the idea being that if you think that there was one deity, that it all started with one deity, and from that one deity, everything else came, all of life. So let's say it started with one, and one split itself into two, and from the two together came all other things. So it would have had to start with one being or one thing, one thought, one energy, something that split itself into hot and cold, wet and dry, light and dark. It would have had to split itself into two opposites. And from those two opposites commingling together came all of life below them, beneath them. So the idea is, without sort of this fine intermingling and mixing between two opposites, you can't have life the way we know life. All right. Look around at all the other planets. They are unlivable for all of us. Why? They don't have that fine balance between the two opposites. We have a very nice balance here on Earth. We have hot and cold and everything in between. We don't have anything that's too extremely cold or too extremely hot. All right? We don't have too much light or too much dark. We don't have too much water or too little water or too much land. It's if it was too extreme here, we would not be able to live here, or at least we would not be what we are here. There might be life here, but it would take on a very different form. We need something. So it's sort of this idea of you can't have humanity. You can't have human beings, the creatures that we are, without the very fine-tuned conditions, this very fine-tuned balance that we have between these two opposites. And the two opposites, if you're monotheistic, the two opposites came from one. The one split itself into two. Somehow, some way. And between those two, all things came from them. So the idea implied there is that there was incest amongst the gods, or the first energies of the universe. All right? That's the idea there. So this is really, to look at it like a bunch of incestuous pedophilic people. And there's other reasons why they do it. Again, it's power play and so on and so forth. And they're very smart and very well educated, and they're looking for excuses for why they should be allowed to do what they do. And so this is the, belief system they sort of worked up around something that's probably kind of true. In terms of like, yeah, okay, if it was one thing that started all things, and it had to split itself into two, then that's sort of like brother and sister, and that's incest, or mother and son, and that's incest. So one way or the other, we all come from one thing, and so it's suggested that it's incest. And so I do think they sort of cling to that idea as an excuse why they should be allowed to commit incest with their own children. So, and again, it very much is related to chaos worship. I see references to it all over the place, both in visual symbols, but also in words, just the written word coming out of some of these guys. So, all right, so moving on to the next thing I wanted to point out. I think the last thing for this video, and then I'm going to cut it off because it's getting kind of long. You can already feel it. And I'm starting to sort of lose my train of thought too often. But yeah, so meditate on this, what I've been pointing out to you here. This little passage. Oh, I overshot it. Oopsies. Oh, I went back too far. You know what? I'm just going to leave it be. Never mind. Never mind. It's cool. But you guys, it was on page 30, guys. And 36 is where they do the deed, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. All right, that's not important. Where I wanted to go to next is 173. Yeah, see, I've been starting to get sidetracked. And I'm trying to keep this clear, concise, to the point, short. Oh, we're on 166. Oh, that's why. I guess the pages don't quite match up. Okay, so we're on 174 here. Ooh, go back. 172, 173. Is this it? Oh, it's around here. I looked it up ahead of time. I searched it via this, but I had to go through a bunch of results to find it, even there. So I don't want to, and it said 173. I made note of it. All right. It's not a big deal. At some point, all right, let me break it down for you a little bit. Caldwell, Chiron, the centaur, the teacher, he has a son who is meant to represent Prometheus. I believe his name is Peter in the story. But he represents Prometheus. Chiron actually relieves Prometheus of his punishment. Prometheus was punished for giving fire to humanity. And there's a certain point where Chiron, Caldwell, and Peter, Prometheus, are driving home. They're driving like across town, and it's getting late for some reason. So this is not in the high school at this point. And even leading up to this, there was sort of this vagabond that they had an interaction with that suggested that Caldwell was going to do something with the boy. So it's sort of alluded to. It's prophesized, if you will, that this is going to happen. It's suggested throughout the story that at a certain point, this guy is probably going to have sex with his own son. And I'm sorry. Again, you guys probably will have to read this. Maybe, hopefully, I'll make a better video at some point. I really have to up my video editing game, but first I have to get a desk. So I don't even have a desk. So yeah, it is suggested all throughout this story, if you pay attention at different parts of the story, there are these little hints dropped that at a certain point there is going to be some kind of incestuous sexual relationship between Chiron, Caldwell, and his son, Peter, or Prometheus. And again, it's around this area, 173, 174, I believe, where they end up in a hotel room. The car breaks down. and father and son end up in a hotel room, and it talks specifically about, you know what? Let's see if I can cut through pink light. So Prometheus, Peter, falls asleep in bed, and his father goes out for a little while, and Peter sort of falls asleep and wakes up to his father in the room, or coming in the room. This wouldn't be, no, not page 11. So we're pretty far down. And it talks about the descriptive being, let's find, there's so many colors used in so many scenes throughout this story that I hesitate to just search pink. But there's a point at which in the hotel room, Peter wakes up from his sleep to see the dark figure of his outline of his father. And I believe this word specifically used, were cutting back and forth through the pink. So again, they're big on using color symbolism. Colors have all kinds of energies and ideas. Pink, for example, often represents children, youth, innocence, little girls, but also, like, you know, our organs, our innards, that we're quite pink on the inside. Did you know that? Again, yeah, just like, you know, yellow can represent cowardice, or sometimes it's funny, it can represent cowardice, like you're yeller. Or it can represent royalty, because it's sometimes associated with gold. So red is often passion. Sometimes it's passion, anger, or hatred, or sometimes it's passion, sexual passion. Blue is often more of a passive, subdued color. Blue is also often associated with nobility, like blue bloods, but then can also be associated with middle class, blue collar. So we do have different ideas associated with colors. These guys have a very specific set of ideas associated with their colors. I do think that comes from, I think it's connected with, so let me, Ludwig, what's this one go with? Goethe, or something like that. It's pronounced, I think it's pronounced Goethe, or I don't know. Yeah, Goethe, Goethe, because I'm an American. Yeah. Oh, it's not you, Ludwig. Johann Wolfgang von. That's why I was because of the Wolfgang. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, whatever. He's a well-known pedophile. He's on the books, officially, as being a pedophile. I believe I read somewhere some quotes from his work where he is actually speaking highly of being attracted to young minors, as if it's, I don't know, some sort of, as if it's not only normal but preferable. So anyway, yeah, he's on the books as being a pedophile, and he wrote Faust. I think a lot of you have at least heard of Faust. It's a story about a guy who sold his soul to the devil. Highly successful. yet dissatisfied with his life, which leads him to make a pact with the devil at a crossroads. Oh. Yeah, so we have, here we go, we have pacts with the devil associated with Faust, with Faust and with Goethe. And he also wrote a great deal about color theory. So go ahead and read this. I do think that a lot of their theories on color are aligned with this guy's writings about color. So Theory of Colors, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And by the way, how is he connected to my suspects? Joachim Frank. Joachim Frank, the father of Zé Frank. Hosea Jan Frank. Let's have a look at his Nobel Prize page. He goes out of his way in his biography to mention that his family from Germany, originally from Germany, they were friends. Let's just find it on the page. No, I know it's in here. Oh, this is a Young Frank. I thought that was it. No, there's more to his story than that. Here it is. There we go. So yeah, here's his bio. And he's from Germany, and the German connection guys. So I have a blog out, for those of you who don't know. I will put the link to that blog in the description for this video. It's called Celebrity Reigns List, R.A.I.N.S. It's R.A. because it stands for ritual abuse. Was it? Yeah, Ritual Abuse Information Network and Support. So Celebrity Reigns List at WordPress.com. And I just put out a blog post called The German Connection, because a lot of these guys seem to be of Germanic descent. And right here, guys, you can see, let's just find it. I don't want to search on. There it is. A branch of her family settled in Frankfurt in the 18th century and gained wealth and notoriety from international wine trading. Speaking of his mother, my mother, Charlotte, came from the distinguished Manskop family. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly either. So a branch of her family settled in Frankfurt in the 18th century and gained wealth and notoriety from international wine trading. They were friends with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe family around the beginning of the 19th century, his family. So we have a connection there. Color theory, using colors, and let's wrap it back around to John Updike. Remember, these people, again, high ranking, that you could consider them to be the aristocracy of our country, or really the world, considering we're talking about some people who have citizenship in multiple countries, highborn compared to most, or considered to be highborn. If they were born with, with better, they got a better start than most, even though they tried to play all humble. They got a better start than most. Let's just put it that way. John Updike. And coming back to his color use in the Centaur. And again, there is a scene where Caldwell, Chiron, goes to a hotel room with his son, Peter, Prometheus. And there are some scenes described while they're staying in the hotel room where a lot of color imagery is used that suggests to me that he had a sexual interaction with his son. I could be wrong about this. If any of you have a different opinion about what, and I mean a real well-formulated opinion, please let me know. Not some stupid comment. It's just getting old. But if you have a different opinion about what that scene might symbolize, if I'm reading into it too much, but I think I gave some good support information to suggest that to you. Again, remember, he wrote a story called Incest. Remember the quote here. And I'm wondering if he ever referenced this guy. And it's always fun when you find out that they reference each other or talk about each other. I mean, obviously, Johann here wouldn't have been able to talk about Updike because there was considerable gap in their lifespans, but Updike could have definitely referenced Gautier. There. Just like how, again, a lot of my, let's look at another, uppity academic white academic dude. Okay, ready? Carl Jung. This guy this guy's in the Library of Congress, noted psychologist. He writes about the Abrasics. He has a book about the Abrasics. Come on, practically. Yeah, so go look into that. I forget why I was referencing Carl Jung now, but oh yeah, they all reference Carl Jung. A lot of my suspects, one way or another, in their content, at some point, like right off the top of my head, I know Zay Frank has quoted Carl Jung. I know that Michael Paul Maxwell, the New York artist, he has used Carl Jung quotes in his artwork. He used a Carl Jung quote in an art installation he did at the high school where he was teaching me during that time period that he was my teacher, my art teacher. All right. So yeah, they drop Carl Jung's name like it's freaking hot potato. Okay. So there are certain figures that these guys are like in love with. Carl Jung being one of them, and quite often this guy pops up as well. Another name worth looking into, who was referenced on Joachim Frank's personal blog, Frank's Fiction, is this guy, William Hogarth. His paintings follow the same kind of color coding and same sorts of references, particularly the Western family painting. Let's see if we can find it. Oh, and this one. The, what is it called? Like the proposal or the marriage proposal, something along those lines. All of the colors in this are important. The people that they are on are important. Even right down to the red heels on this guy's shoes over here. All right? The reference is to like Medusa up here in the top left, this circular painting there, looking down on this whole scene where this girl is being betrothed to a man, and her father is going over the marriage contract and, you know, the money and working it all out. All right? And over here, there's not, the picture's cut off, the painting's cut off, but you can see the father typically off on the right. Here is another version. Here we go. And he's pointing to a family tree coming out of, I forget that guy's name. I looked him up. He's significant. I have to make a whole other video. So another video to come where I'm going to break down more of, I already made a video showing you some of Hogarth's paintings like over a year ago. So you can go back and start looking for some of those if you want. I will probably do some refresher videos because, again, this is all very significant how color is used to symbolize certain things, guys. It's very significant. It's used by artists, savvy artists and authors. And they are using the same color theory system, and it relates to sort of these higher ideas and philosophies, like the incest that comes from the inevitable incest that's suggested by this spiritual notion that we all come from one thing, that there's this monotheistic hierarchy, and it all started with one energy. All right. And they represent that with certain symbols. They represent that with certain colors. And yeah, I will just really quickly pull up William Hogarth's The Western Family, because that painting was referenced by Joachim Frank. Where are we at on time? 47 minutes. It was referenced by Joachim Frank on his blog, his personal blog called Frank's Fiction, FRANX, FICTION. And yeah, again, the colors being used are very important. The pink and the white, the red stripe down the back of that little girl's dress there, the red of his trousers and the area around his genitals, the silvery colors for the women, mirrors in the background with the veil, the mirrored veil in the background. Yeah. And in case you can't tell from the surroundings, this is definitely some American aristocracy, or I believe British aristocracy, whatever. Whitey white McWhitey aristocracy. All right. And remember how I have dubbed these guys the Western cult. Okay? Because, again, there are a lot of references to the Western. I'm not going to get into that right now, but I just wanted to leave it on this. So, Zay Frank's brother-in-law, the guy married to Zay Frank's sister, the son-in-law of Joachim Frank, he drew a reference to this painting, and Joachim Frank posted it on his personal blog. William Hogarth, so again, is very significant. So is Carl Jung. So is Gautier, this dude here. So is John Updike. So are the colors being used to symbolize certain things, guys, in the media that you are consuming. If you pay attention, you're being groomed to associate certain colors with certain ideas and feelings. All right? All right, I'm going to leave it there. Good night.